Tuesday, and welcome to the MSLead Chronicles. It's a podcast on a mission in medical affairs and leadership. I'm Mary Morton, and along with my buddy, Chad Fellers, we're going to have casual talk about important topics and challenges in leadership. And we are so glad you're here. Stay tuned.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of MSLead Chronicles. I am your host, Chad Fellers, along with my lovely sidekick, Mary Morton. How are you today, Mary?
I am terrific, as usual.
Yeah,
well, fun Halloween.
Yeah, so what's your favorite candy, by the way?
It is Butterfinger.
Butterfinger.
But, look.
Mac and cheese.
I haven't tried it yet. But it was a kid that was dressed up as Kraft macaroni and cheese. It was a homemade costume. It was so cute. They used like paper towel rolls to make the mac and cheese.
Yeah.
It's really neat. So there's
Wow.
2 little mac and cheeses in there. I'm waiting. Liam and I are going to have to try them together because I don't know if it's going to taste like macaroni and cheese. So
I hope not.
Wow. I've thought about, we've talked about apples. We've talked about all these different types of things, right, that you said to hand out. But mac and cheese is at next level. So I'll just take your word for it, Mary. You can get back to me on how that turns out. I'm not sure I'm going to try that. I'm not sure if I'm that brave. But anyway, it's so good to be back. Welcome back, listeners, to this. We've got a great episode today. We've had lots of conversations around insights. You know that is something that's near and dear to my heart, because I really believe that is how we show our values within medical affairs. And we're going to talk and take a little bit different angle today. As good as insights can be, oftentimes there's struggle with integration and how do we actually socialize these types of things and really maximize the value of the things that we're bringing in. How do we reward the people that are actually bringing those in? And then are we even looking at multiple angles of those types of things beyond just within the field? So I think we're going to have a really good conversation. We've got a great guest that's with us today. And Mary, I'm just going to kick it over to you and let you introduce him to our listeners.
Right on. Okay, joining us today is the great Carl De Luca, PhD, coming at us from San Diego, California. So I first met Carl. We just discussed this. It's been 10 years where I stole him away from his company and introduced him to Regeneron, where he was on the Praluent team, the very successful PCSK9 inhibitor, and made a transition over to the oncology team. And now he's in a new role. And I'm going to let him share that part with everybody, which will give you a better idea of what we're going to be talking about today. So, Carl, would you mind telling everybody what you're doing now?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to it. So I was, I've been an MSL since 2007 and then, went to Regeneron in 2014 and was in the field for 7 years and then switched to a regional director role. And then last year we created a new position and it was a medical insights position. So we have a new team. It's called the strategy team. And it includes me, which is medical insights and analytics. And my job is basically to direct the insights approach for the oncology field medical team. And since it's a new role, we're kind of, it's an iterative process. I mean, we try lots of things. Some things work, some things don't work, but it's been really fun. And I think the value of insights cannot be understated. I think, and you were just saying this, Chad, it is the currency of MSLs, because I think sometimes we think that, the role is basically to go out there and just disseminate information and talk about your company. But if you're not bringing back what you're talking about, you're leaving all this value out there. So I think that it's a bi-directional information exchange, and we definitely need to hear what's being said in the field and train our teams to be able to kind of extract that information in a way that's, useful for the company.
This is going to be a great conversation. I'm already smiling ear to ear if you're not watching the podcast and just listening to it. Before we get into kind of first your key takeaways, I am curious about this first, Carl. So this is a new role. How did this come about? Like, how did you, or how did the company make this a priority to go? And then has this been a passion of yours as well too? Or tell us a little bit about why you chose to step into it.
Yeah, so insights has been kind of like a buzzword for the last several years, and it was something that I was doing prior to getting the role. So it was a passion of mine. I recognize the importance of insights and abhor metrics, and so I thought, what a good way to kind of put my passions to use and do this medical insights role. And so that's kind of how it came about. And there was just a need for it. It's like we have, not a huge team, but there was just so much information coming in, and there was really no way to kind of synthesize reports out of it or make sense of it, or even just to guide it. It was just very organic and kind of disorganized, for lack of a better word. So, and I think I think teams need a role like this. I think this is something that should definitely be adopted across companies.
I could not agree with you more. Just even thinking about like, how do you measure the ROI? And we talk about all the time is you can't tie it to prescriptions and things like this. So how are we really showing this? Well, when you have expansions or when you have all this type of thing, I mean, where does the bottom line come into, right? And I think that this is definitely one way to be able to capture some of that about the value of scientific, peer-to-peer exchange from the field medical side, but then even beyond, right? I mean, how are we getting a 360 view of how things are working in the field, whether it's patient advocacy, whether it's, so there's so many pieces of it. So I love this. This is going to be a fun conversation. Yeah. I love hearing that story that there's been a priority for that. I know it's a massive build out and things that you're going to have to do to kind of streamline those processes. So we're going to have you back to talk more about that and how that's gone. So anyway, before we get going and digging into this, we always, as tradition, if you will, here on the podcast is to give our listeners the key takeaways. That way, if they have to stop listening for a few minutes, they can know what they can come back to listen to or already start applying things. So if you have those, would you mind sharing them?
Sure. And they're kind of short, but I think they pretty much make the point. So the first one is that insights demonstrate the value of a field team. I think that is, paramount. I think by showing kind of what you're bringing in is better than showing them kind of how many times you're visiting somebody. So I think that truly shows the value, and there's a lot of value in those insights. I mean, like you said, it's kind of the currency of field medical teams, and that's absolutely the case. The second one is, in order for insights to be successful, you need to involve the key internal stakeholders. Doing it as a field team kind of on your own is just not, it's a lot of work and doesn't really yield dividends. You need to have everybody involved in order to help direct the process. So that's definitely key. And the third one is you need technology. Technology enables it. You can do it without, but I mean, you're swimming, against the current. So technology is absolutely key in order to make it work.
So this is gonna be funny. I think it'll help set things up. Number one, they're great takeaways. You mentioned something about, well, these are short. And what I would say is we're talking about qualitative things anyway today, right? It doesn't matter about the quantity. We're just we're trying to focus on qualitative information. So even if it's short, that's great because those are definitely applicable. So let's dig in a little bit. Yeah. So Mary, why don't you kick us off with a couple of questions?
Well, I guess one question that came to mind really quickly, and it's a quick question, quick answer. The role that you're in right now, did Regeneron already have that kind of role for the other TAs?
No. So what happened was we had an expansion in the summer of 2020. 2, I believe it was. And so we created, and I was kind of part of this, created an insights role. So we were the first ones to do such a thing. And then it basically kind of grew from there. So it was kind of insights and engagements. But then last year became completely insights focused.
This has been something that a lot of people talk about, and MSLs kind of struggle to gather insights. And I heard you talk about this, a couple months ago, and you were talking about going to the grocery store without a list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So can you kind of share that story or that analogy for our listeners, because I think that relates to that question pretty well.
Yeah, I think that analogy kind of summarizes kind of what field medical teams are kind of up against when, we're tasked with getting insights without clear direction. So the analogy is that, we're going to send you out to the grocery store because I'm making this recipe. I'm not going to tell you what the recipe is. Just go to the store and get the stuff, And so what's going to happen? Well, you're going to get a lot of stuff and probably a lot of stuff you don't need. And so that's basically kind of what's happening with teams that really don't have a strategy when it comes to insights. First of all, there's the medical strategies maybe not always communicated. And also what is needed is not what's communicated. So you're missing the recipe and kind of like the final product. And to send somebody out to a store to get ingredients for it is going to be impossible. You're going to get a lot of stuff that you don't need and basically spend a lot of money needlessly. Mm-hmm. So to have, and what that really kind of goes back to is having key insight topics and key insight questions. That's kind of what we mean by the recipe or the shopping list. And basically it's like listening priorities, some people call those, but we call them kits and kicks, which is topics and questions. And that really kind of directs the team and it allows the team to train on them as well, and know kind of what to ask, why we're asking it. That's key. If you don't know why you're asking something, then it makes it very difficult to get a good answer.
I love it. The shopping list. Yeah. You walk away with junk food, right? And I think about the junk I think about the junk of insights that come in sometimes, like Dr. So-and-so loves our products. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, right? That's information and not insights, right? So that's I love that analogy. So you talked about training a little bit. Talk about that process as far as, because this goes beyond even, I would say even the MSLs, but I mean, like all those that are involved. I mean, who needs that kind of training? And can you talk a little bit about the importance? Does it require recurring things, or what does good look like from your experience when it comes to training?
Training? Yeah. So I think what we focus on at Regeneron for training when it comes to insights in the field teams is the ability to get to the why of something that's said to you. It's like if you go in there, and say you're showing somebody your data and you ask them kind of, what is your perception of the data? And they tell you, well, it looks great, and then you leave it at that. It's like, oh, look, that looks good. And it's like, which is great. That's an observation. There's value in those. But an insight would be asking why. What's good about it? Or is there anything missing from it? Is there anything that we should incorporate into our next studies? To get kind of to the heart of the matter, and by asking probing questions, that's when you really start, striking gold with insights, when you can ask those probing questions. So that's one component of the training. Second component is that you have to have the disease state knowledge down. It's very difficult to ask questions when you're not entirely confident of what you're asking or why you're asking it. And so having a rigorous training program in the disease state or the therapy is absolutely essential. You can't have those two not together. For instance, if you're having a conversation with a KOL who's the world's expert in whatever disease, and you're intimidated because he knows more than I do, that's not going to make for a good conversation. It's not going to make for very probing conversation because you're basically going to stand down. But if you know your data better than he does, which you do, then you can really have a robust discussion and really pull out that information that drives medical strategy. Because that's the goal. The goal is, gather this information so that it does inform strategy. so that in the end, what we hear in the field is incorporated into medical strategy. And in the end, that actually has a benefit to patient outcomes, because that's ultimately the goal, is that listening to our customers so that in the end, the patients benefit.
I saw Mary smiling a minute ago. Just, I think the whole thing about telling why, and I think she's called me the why guy a couple of times in the past, right? I mean, because
You've asked me to call you that.
Oh, well, maybe that's why you
said,
called me that.
Can
Never
you get
mind.
me a T-shirt made that says "I'm the why guy"?
Yeah, or why ask why, something like that. Yeah.
Yes, why ask why.
I think that's so important. I think oftentimes too, can technology support that and summarize that as well too? I mean, if you don't get into that, first of all, if you don't get into the why, it's just like a market survey, and there's market surveys that are done all the time to give you that answer, but they don't know what's driving the behavior. And so many times, if we take the time to have those in-depth conversations and really seek to understand, it can let us know, well, I mean, are they misinformed? Are they thinking about the data in the right way? Are they missing a component of it? Or is it something that we've missed as well too, right? So you're either confirming strategy, or it informs like your next plans on how to engage, almost like a learning journey, if you will. Can I move on to the next thing, or do we need to go back and really revisit something down the road too, right? Yeah. So I love the idea of being able to understand the context for it. And then plus, I mean, let's just even talk about it from an emotional intelligence standpoint too. I mean, the part of this component of the people we engage, it's not what you say, it's how you make them feel. There is that mixture too. And so by even just digging into wanting to learn more, that's showing that you are valuing what it is that they're having to share, right? So
exactly,
treating it like you're truly trying to understand versus, I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about the balance between, like, when you're talking about having some streamlined questions, which I am 100% aligned with. How do you make sure it doesn't feel like a survey, or like I'm going through? Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's sometimes I've had MSLs go, look, I've got through all 7 or all 10 questions in my last interaction. Like, I need to pat them on the back or something. I'm like, no, because they're going to start thinking why aren't you paying me for this? Like an advisory board, right?
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So one thing when I do tell the team is that you are under no obligation to get every answer to every question. It's like, and we can't be proactive about it, especially if it's something that's, off label. So basically what I tell them, if it is something that you can react to, then go ahead and react to it. And then, if, then you can actually start incorporating some questions into the conversation organically, not go refer to a list of questions. So if you can work it into the conversation, that's the best way to go. If you can't, then it does kind of seem artificial, and like you're, going to whip out your clipboard and start writing down, the survey answers. So it's the art of being an MSL. Because I think we've been doing this for years and years, where we have these questions sometimes in feedback surveys, but we don't want to, pull out the iPad or the clipboard. But let's find a way to incorporate this into everyday conversation. And it might not just be one visit. You might have to make multiple visits to this person to get to the bottom of, what it is they're thinking. And that's fine, and some visits might just be observational data only. And, not every interaction is going to be an insight. So don't force it. It's like, if you have a good rapport with the person, they have confidence in your abilities, from a scientific perspective, then I think it will come. But if you force it, then it's not as easy.
So if I can jump in, I've heard you also say that insights should be socialized.
Yeah.
So can you go into a little bit of that, what you mean by that?
Yeah. So it's almost like a training tool for us. So the team goes out and they collect insights. A lot of them are, just organic insights, things that they're hearing in their everyday interactions with HCPs that aren't part of any kind of like kid or kick initiative. And so what we try to do, is, like, once a month, gather all the MSLs and medical directors, and just, and I'll create the summary of the insights and kind of like what the key takeaways were for that month, and to sit down and just have a discussion about that. Because I think what you learn is that some people are having discussions that you're not having, and it's like great best practice sharing, but also it's a learning exercise as well. It's like you don't know what you don't know. So it's like by hearing these conversations, by hearing what your KOL said, comparing it to what somebody else's KOL said, can really kind of get to the heart of the matter. And I think having medical directors who are cross-functional stakeholders, to probe as well, it just makes you a much better MSL. It makes you much more equipped to go and have these conversations externally. Is talking about something and teaching it to others, I think is kind of like the best training. And having socializing these insights amongst the team, I feel is the best way to learn kind of about your disease state.
So in those situations, I don't know if Regeneron hires people that are fairly new to MSLing or never have done it before. I know back, when we spent a lot of time recruiting for you guys, they didn't hire anybody who'd never been MSLing before. But, in a situation where somebody's maybe not quite as senior, do you get into situations where it's kind of like role playing a little bit, or, I haven't experienced that situation with a thought leader before. So do you utilize this time to kind of teach the art of getting to that insight?
Yeah. So actually we have started hiring people that don't have it not right out of school, but like maybe they were working in like some kind of biotech company and want to make the switch to, working as an MSL. So we do have those people, and that does take a kind of special kind of training, because typically they're usually PhDs. And so maybe they're not versed as well in the art of the conversation. Mm-hmm. So definitely having that role playing and workshops to kind of, to practice what you're learning, like Socratic consulting. We used to do that at Abbott, where, you basically learning how to ask questions, and I think you definitely need that component of training, especially if you have a newer team. And some of the best hires I've made have been people who've had no experience, so I think there's value in that type of experience, and I think that you can train somebody to be like the best MSL, even if they have no experience.
Some of my greatest MSLs have been just that, right? I mean, teaching, because it's tough sometimes to teach an old dog new tricks, so to speak, I guess. And so if you can really set the ground of like what the expectation is in the beginning, sometimes it can really be impactful. So yeah, certainly both are definitely are viable and good approaches to have a blend of those types. All over the spectrum, I think is good with that.
And we've hired company like the MSL Society does an insights training. So we've had them come out and do like a 2-day workshop with us where, it is role playing, it is going through scenarios. It's actually, looking at our medical strategy and developing an insight strategy around it. So that is definitely very helpful. I think it's a really good learning experience to basically, like you say, kind of role play it. It's not comfortable, but I think it's something that you need to do once in a while.
So you talked about the monthly meetings, right, that you have with that. So, but what about with the other cross-functional stakeholders? I mean, from your side, like do you have any best practices for sharing those? And then even let me take it one step further too. I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you keep MSLs motivated to continue to dig for insights? And what I mean by that is oftentimes I've seen companies, especially when you don't have those systems in places, they feel like they go into a black hole. Can you talk a little bit about both sharing those across and then how you reinforce that with your teams and how they buy into that process?
Yeah. So for your first question, sharing it across functions, that is difficult. Because I mean, every company is the same. Everybody's stretched thin, it's like, you can't be at meetings all day long. So you have to find a way to give it, send that information out. And an Excel spreadsheet is not it. The Word document is not it. PowerPoint document isn't it either. So I'm really struggling with trying to find a new way to do it. We're thinking like, like a website where, it's almost like a chat GPT, where it's like you have the insights, you have the reports, but also you can query the insights. And that's something that kind of our big tech project is, to be able to have that, where you kind of almost have like an insight knowledge engine, where you can actually, if you have a question, you're designing a study, and you want to know, what is this unmet medical need in this region, by having all different sources of data kind of converge and have some type of AI, you can actually start pulling out like very insightful things that the field is learning, combined with claims data and med info. And so that's kind of the goal. We're not there yet. So right now we're still doing, documents, but that's my goal, is to be able to have kind of like that, almost like the search engine, but that's, specific to your company. And that's based on insights.
Carl's a visionary. I love this.
Yeah.
This is good. Yeah.
So we're actively doing that at Regeneron. So we're trying to work, it's like not basically converging all this data into one data lake and applying different AI models to it. And it's not just going to be Gen AI. It'll be large language models. It'll be different types to get kind of the product that you're looking for. So, because Chat GPT is not the solution to everything.
That's right. Right.
Yeah. So it has to be kind of a balanced approach. And we're actively working on that, to have that kind of that knowledge engine built.
From a compliance standpoint, do you have kind of an opinion about free text versus dropdown?
Very strong opinion.
Okay, let's hear it.
Yeah, so I am a proponent of free text, because I think doing dropdowns is useful if you're looking for some quantitative measure. You can't pick up nuance with a dropdown, and so I think free text is really the way to go. Analyzing free text is painful, and there are risks associated with free text. So it's that you could everything is discoverable, whether you're writing it down on a piece of paper or you're putting it into your CRM. It's all discoverable. So everything should be compliant, but there are times when people are, just kind of slip, So I think there's, you have to have spot checks. You have to make sure legal and compliance are on board. You have to have guardrails. And I think also technology is a solution here as well. It's like if there's AIs that could basically be applied to these free text boxes before you submit them and say, okay, this has some language that could be out of compliance. And then it would allow you to kind of prevent that from happening. So that's something that we're also looking into doing, where you kind of have that check before you submit it. Of course, this is going to take time to develop, but some of our programs already have that, where they kind of go through, I think when we do our performance evaluations, there's like a legal check to make sure you're not saying things that are, that could cause the company trouble, inadvertently. So I think there are solutions to that. But free text is, I think, the best way, and especially if you can, in the world of AI, I think that's really the way to go. And the other problem with dropdowns is that unless you have an enormous team, you're never going to get the N for a response that's meaningful to a data nerd. It's like if the CMO of your company, we give them an insight report and it has an N of 4, basically, which is like anecdote. It's not data. It's just an N of 4. It's like, what does that tell you? Nothing, So I think you need to have that nuance. You need to have that free text. You need to kind of synthesize a response that is nuanced. It's not black or white. You need to kind of understand all facets of the problem. And you just don't get that with dropdowns.
I just want to ask one quick follow-up, and then we can get Chad's take. But I think I've heard a couple of people say that in a lot of your systems you have the ability to like tag an insight.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's something that people are widely using?
Absolutely. So, for instance, at Regeneron, we use Viva CRM surveys, and so we have surveys that where you're going to put in an organic survey, but you qualify it. What kind of conversation was it? Was it, whatever, one-on-one conversation? Was it a group presentation? What tumor type were you discussing for oncology, obviously? What product were you discussing? There's ways to basically kind of tag it so you can filter the insight. And now we actually using Acceleration Point has this program called Quello, and they have an AI called LCAI. And now I can actually go through my unstructured free text and start pulling out key takeaways, summaries from those. So there are solutions to that, but So even if you're not, even if it's just free text and without any kind of like filters or tags applied to it, you can still pull it out. Like I did it a couple hours ago before I got on this call. I was looking for insights about melanoma that we've collected in the month of October, and I just basically typed a natural language question into the LCAI, and it's like, what were the key insights from the month of October on melanoma, resectable melanoma, to be even more specific, and it pulls it out. It identifies the insights, tries to create a summary. It's not always perfect, but it's a draft that a human will then perfect. That's what I see as the AI component, where it's not going to do my job for me. It's just going to kind of, instead of giving me a blank piece of paper, I have it's written already. I just got to go in and edit it.
Augmented intelligence, right? Versus
Exactly.
artificial, right? So, I mean, there are so many different use cases to help at least kind of get something on paper where you can tweak things and make it put the right language into. I think that's great. As far as back to the question around free text, I think it's the answer is yes. I mean, I think we have to have that. I mean, if we're thinking about the why, you can't do a why in the dropdown. You can now, where I have seen, and this is just not the technology. I think we can get there now, but we haven't been in the past, which is what I wanted to be able to do, or want to be able to do for a long time, is with strategic imperatives, if you will, and some of these that are maybe it's disease state, you could even say, or whatever your legal and compliance is signed off on, that can be proactive questions that you can ask as part of conversations. That's where I think that if there are ways to predict like what maybe the answer may be. I mean, for example, if it's like place in therapy, maybe we'll just say our treatment algorithm, if we were going to do that, right? So a new product to market, first line, second line, whatever that may be. And then I would love for it to be able to basically say, okay, we asked this question to 100 providers across the US. The response was 60% said that it was first line, and then be able to say of that, right?
Yeah.
This 40 of the providers that said that this is the way to go is because of safety and tolerability, or because of dosing and administration, right? That's that second layer that the AI, I think, if you can quantify it, that gives confidence to things about, hey, we need to prioritize how we move things forward. In our medical strategy, et cetera. We're missing something because this is a recurring theme. It's so hard to, people have insights, this definition of insights. I think it's standardizing what that is important across the company as well too. Is insight just something that is organic and just comes up, and that you think it's new and fresh and it's not ever been discussed before, and that's what you're focused on? Or are you really trying to confirm what your team is or what the actual team, the medical affairs team, is trying to accomplish, right? It's two different thought processes. It can be both, to be clear, and you can capture both of those, and they're both important. But I would say those organic ones sometimes are just few and far between, and you have to really be in that reactive mode to do it. So what are ways that we could potentially move some of those things and leverage it in different ways to help inform where we want to go as a company? So that's my thought process on it as well too.
Yeah, no, and the thing is, we do that. Like with our kits and kicks, sometimes we can incorporate, binary responses or multiple choice, but then we leave a space for other, which is unstructured free text. And that's, that's where the value is. It's like, yes, you get a nice, pretty graph by having a multiple choice, but what you really need to know is why they answer it that
That's
way.
right.
And
That's right.
so it's a combination, so.
I've
Yeah,
thought
and the thing
about,
go
it's
ahead.
just so I'm curious what your thoughts about this. Like I tried in a couple or a previous company to have it embedded within Viva in the free text component, the word because.
Oh.
No, seriously. I mean,
Yeah.
because that forces someone to tell me what the reason the insight was given, or why they think why this provider thinks that this is important. Because if that's missing, I mean, that's the part that really can help shift things and be that value add. So
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know. I never got it through. I would have loved for that to be, I mean, to understand the thought process behind it, a reason given. I think it's so valuable. Okay. I'll be quiet now for a
Yeah.
second.
No, so yeah, the teams, they get better with time, because the thing is, it's something new. I think collecting insights, having it tied to strategy, is not something that everybody's been doing, and it just takes time for teams to kind of to understand, the nuances of it. And like the team that I'm on, right now that I'm working with, in the beginning it was tough because it was mostly observations. But now that we've kind of gone through them, we've socialized them, we've had training. Now, I'm getting a lot more of the why instead of just the observation. But I'm all for. I mean, if it were up to me, I would allow teams to put basically their MSL notes in Aviva CRM. It's like, if there may be any insights in there, but there's information. If it's something that you're hearing all the time, it's not insightful. But when it's, you kind of look at MSL notes and, it's like, I see a trend. It's like everybody's mentioning this particular, I don't know, treatment or disease state or unmet medical need. Then that in quantity becomes an insight. So there's value in notes. There's value in like, key insight topics and questions. There's value in like pure insights where it's like, wow, this person said this, let's share it. So there's value everywhere. It's just got to figure out how to mine it and how to do it in a compliant way.
That's probably a little, especially it depends on what company you're working on, that maybe they have a heightened sense of compliance for, whatever reason. Maybe they're under a CIA, or maybe they just got off one and they just don't want to go back. But
Yeah.
I was thinking about, can you imagine having this sort of system? I don't mean like Viva, the system, but I mean like a system of organizing your insights 10 years ago, like how different. I mean, that probably makes it feel like 10 years ago you were going to the grocery store without a list.
Exactly.
It's how much better it is. And then you have that uphill both ways in the snow discussion with these people who just became MSLs a year ago. Like, you guys have no idea what it used to be like.
Back in my day. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, with going back to the technology thing, it's like, for like, if I have a meeting with a KOL, because I mean, I still do that once in a while. It's like I'll sit in on some, and I will actually go to ChatGPT or Copilot Pro or one of the AIs and like literally ask it the questions that I would ask the KOL. And it kind of gives me enough background to kind of know what to expect. And then when you kind of know what to expect, you can actually start asking why. So I encourage the team to use, we have an internal AI as well, where you can ask these questions, like, kind of predict almost what you might hear and then be prepared to kind of dig further. So there's so many ways to like to improve your game, and there's a lot of technology out there. And I just think it's going to get better and better, as we kind of progress.
So let's shift to that, right? When we talked about that, that was one of your takeaways, right, around technology, and we've talked a little bit already about it. We already talked about the value of that, the things, how it can enhance, and we even talked about AI and some of those things. You mentioned something around claims data earlier, so I'm curious, like, what role, when we think about health records, real world data, all those types of things, can you talk about your thoughts on how to incorporate that, or the value that may bring to bring those into the insight process?
Yeah, I think for claims data or EHR data, I think that is basically kind of the measure of if you're successful. Because the thing is, well, we can't rely on sales data, and we shouldn't rely on sales data. But if you have, say, insights, you kind of mine your insights, you discover that there's a unmet medical need or an unmet, education gap, and you create initiatives around that. So at Regeneron, we have these things called CLIOs, which are clinical impact opportunities. And so you can basically derive those from um, going through insights like, wow, people are, saying that this particular disease state, this mutation, there's really nothing to treat it. And it's a frustration for physicians. And let's say, Regeneron may have something that could, treat that or inform it at least. We can develop initiatives either through IIS programs or education programs or whatever it is, whatever intervention that we choose to do as a field medical organization, and implement that. And then, longitudinally look at claims data as like, well, is there an increase in diagnosis of X disease based on the initiative that we took, we did with this particular disease state or this unmet medical need, or whether it's, screening programs. Like, we hear this a lot in lung cancer. It's like there's just not enough screening programs in the South. And, what are ways that a company like Regeneron could help, bring awareness to that? Is it through education initiatives through physicians or through, primary care physicians? There's things that we could do to kind of affect change. And then we could look like a year down the road and say, wow, there's an increase in the, diagnosis of early stage lung cancer, which is more treatable and is associated with better outcomes. So there's real tangible benefits for the patient, but also really shows kind of as a team what you have the capability of doing. So having electronic medical records, claims data, you keep saying gold and currency, but it truly is. It's, this basically kind of shows what field teams do, and ultimately improve the lives of patients.
They're actually, I love this. I actually was in a conversation with someone in my network earlier this week, and they are doing, their company is now and this is very forward thinking. Okay. But even when they've gotten rid of metrics altogether.
Excellent.
Now, but what they are doing is they're measuring to see, like they'll go into a region and say, okay, the diagnosis rate is below the national average here. So it's in essence, how they're being evaluated is the increase in open claims data and things like that. If the goal really is to increase awareness and the diagnosis, that's how they are being measured now. And you know what? I mean, quite honestly, I'm not opposed to that. I mean, because that really is our core mission. Now, obviously, there are a lot of factors that go into that, and maybe that's not the entire way that you're evaluated. But if you're really thinking about ways of really trying to ensure performance is going well, that there's intention behind conversations, all those types of things, and we're really trying to do what the core of our job is to increase patient care and things, why don't we look at it? So I thought, I mean, whether it is a successful model or not going down the road, I mean, but wouldn't it, I think it would be beautiful to say, okay, look, my MSL came into this region, not product specific to be clear, but to say, okay, look, there is an increase in therapeutic prescriptions in this area, or there's an increase in diagnosis of this, and I can trace it back to a footprint where my MSL has been there over the past 6 months or things like that. Is that the only reason? No, but could it be part of it? Absolutely, it could too. So anyway, I applauded this company for even thinking about those types of things and utilizing technology in a new way.
You can't expect to, boil the ocean. It's like you can't do everything, but it's
That's
like
right.
there are little facets where you can see that you affected change. And it's possible to do that with MSL teams.
How are you thinking about this, or how are y'all thinking when you think about the different data collection points, right? So, I mean, you mentioned EHR, real world data. Can can you talk, or what about other omni-channel type, or I guess it's not omni-channel, it's multi-channel, right?
Yeah.
How are you working? Are there efforts to feed in multiple data points from different parts of the organization? How is that working out?
Yeah, so we're doing that right now. So we're not really working with our omni-channel group because they're more dissemination and not necessarily kind of bringing data in. But we do have, independent medical education. There's lots of data that they collect based on kind of unmet educational needs. MedInfo, they field questions from, physicians, even from patients sometimes. So that's really informative, and that could be kind of included in that data lake I was talking about. Advisory boards, it's like you have advisory boards all the time, MSL notes, insights, those are the obvious ones. Yeah, social media. It's like social media is huge. You need to be able to mine that. Press like OncLive for, Regeneron for oncology programs. You could, basically kind of get information from different web sources. So there's so much data that you could basically mine and combine with your data to get a very rich answer. And that's exactly what we're trying to do right now. I mean, it's not going to be easy, and we're evaluating, vendors at the moment, but I think we'll get there. And I'm piloting the project at Regeneron. So we're going to do it with oncology and hopefully be able to scale it out to other therapeutic areas as well as our global partners.
And this is why I love that. This is why I like the move to incorporating AI. Right? You mentioned something like advisory boards.
Yeah.
Like we for so long we have thought about the medical affairs functions as separate instead of extensions of all one thing. And so, I can't tell you how many times even clinical development teams or even medical directors trying to get them to log things into the CRM so they can all be together, and they will not do it. Right. So now you can take different, whether it's a PDF or you can take a PowerPoint, you can put all this stuff together and it can summarize all those things together. So you're not missing those pieces, because insights were bucketed as just field activity, and that's just one component of it. And it misses part of the KOL engagements. And so I think that's great. I think even patient advocacy, right? I mean, if you have
absolutely.
medical supporting, you can really inform clinical trial designs, or you can fit, or certain gaps of when a PDUFA day, whatever that looks like. There's so many different angles that I don't think we've thought about in the past. And part of it is because the manual efforts, I think, in many times to do this. So I'm really excited to see what the next 10 years is going to look like with the advancements of this, even trending over time, all those types of things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It'll be exciting to see I would say like in a couple of years, we'll probably get there where we have this, these data lakes that you can mine for information and pull all types of unstructured data in and start tagging it and, being able to pull out, information that we need to move forward. And it would have taken years to do it by hand, and probably could be done in minutes now. So, yeah.
So I want to kind of go back to, but to hit on takeaway number 2 as we get ready to wind down here. You said for the insights to be successful, we have to involve all the stakeholders in.
Yeah.
I assume we're talking about like devising what these are going to be and developing the strategy So what is your thought on the best way to make that happen and make everybody feel like they are a part of designing all of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think we're 100% successful with it, but for instance, for medical strategy for 2025, I sat in on all the, medical strategy meetings in terms of what we plan on doing for 2025 and how we'll incorporate the field team and how we'll incorporate insights to basically drive strategy and to inform strategy. So but basically by demonstrating your capabilities, I think that's probably the most successful way to, get stakeholder involvement. And we're doing the same thing with like our clinical trial or clinical development teams, where we have these initiatives to meet with potential investigators at conferences and basically kind of evaluate them as potential, like, I don't want to say like white glove service clinical trial sites, but basically it's kind of like the go-to site for a particular study, and kind of ask them about the study design, but not as like a, I don't know, consulting agreement type thing, and basically develop relationships with potential investigators and basically show our value there as well. Because I mean we've tried that, and because what happens is that you have clinical development medical directors or medical directors talking to all these potential investigators, and their notes live on paper or in their head. And, and it's like, then it comes time to start a study, and it's like, well, where's all this information? It's like, well, I don't know. It's like, I talked to this person, I think, at ESMO, and maybe, he said he was interested, but I don't remember. And so you end up wasting a lot of time. So basically having, everybody involved and everybody kind of being consistent and using CRM. That's one thing that I'm really, really pushing, is to have medical directors, or it doesn't have to be CRM, but some type of documentation system, because, if somebody leaves a company, you lose so much information. So you have to document, and it cannot just be a piece of paper. It has to be something that, is easily accessible. And I'm really pushing to get medical directors to, at least to start using CRM. And I've actually been quite successful at that for meetings. So they've actually been logging the interactions, because there's no way you can have a 360 view of what's happening with the KOL unless everybody's participating in the documentation. And so I think, when they see the value in it, they saw the value in it, and then now they're doing it. So I think you just have to kind of show that why you're doing it and what the potential benefit is. And they're on board.
Well, so it's like, what's the phrase? I mean, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Isn't that right?
Yeah.
I don't know of anybody that's actually eaten elephants before, but I mean, it's a good concept. I think one of the things, what I heard out of that, and I've been guilty of this in the past, trying to get everybody on board at the same time, right? And doing that. And I think one of the things, if we would take the same mindset of like when a new product comes out and launches, right? You have early adopters, you have some that sit and wait to see how things are, that they're skeptical, and then they have some that are just wait and see, and how others are experiencing it too. And so it's like, when you're having these conversations with cross-functional, who can be your early who can be your early adopter for this, that can be all of a sudden become your advocate for others internally as well too, right? So it's, if we start small and then just get the snowball going, I guess, if you will, that may be an approach that if I could go back and try again, that might actually be the best way to do it. So I like that you mentioned starting slow with that.
Yeah. And you have to make it easy. I mean, starting slow is one thing, but you also have to, because I mean, Viva CRM, let's not kid ourselves, is not the easiest platform to use. I mean, at least our version. I'm sure maybe there are better versions than what we're using, but I mean, it's not easy. So what I've been doing is I've been letting them use Microsoft Teams forms, which are a lot easier to use than Viva CRM. Viva CRM is painful. The field teams are obliged to use it, because of compliance. Medical directors are not. They should, but they're not. So using MS Forms, they can use it on their phone, they can use it on their iPad. It's the outcome is the same. It's an Excel spreadsheet that you get, or the output rather. And so you just have to make it easier for them. And we're working with Quello, Acceleration Point, to create almost like a standalone program where they can actually input their medical insights outside of Viva, and they just kind of feed into Viva and feed into our analysis. So basically kind of dressing up Viva a little bit to get more simple to use interface, I think would probably make a huge difference.
Listen, you're solving a problem, though, right? And there's multiple ways of doing that, and I think that That's good. That's a good idea. Microsoft. I didn't think about that as another alternative to do that, because there's some resistance, I think, sometimes to Viva, and you're right, some of the difficulties of navigating through. Again, it's that whole junk in, junk out, or garbage in, garbage out type of concept.
Yeah.
All right. So you've talked a lot of different things. We talked a lot of different things. I'm a forward thinker. Obviously, it's clear that you're a visionary as well too. When we think about looking ahead, right, about the trends, things that you see that are shaping the future of insight gathering in medical affairs, can you talk a little bit about where you see things? Like you mentioned the short term, but where do you see things in the next 5 years? What do you think it might look like?
I would say, from an AI perspective, from an analysis perspective, I think we'll get very far in the next 5 years. I think we'll probably be able to achieve kind of what we're talking about today, where it's like you can query the database and pull out information that's key to strategy. So that kind of, that data engine, or kind of like I'm not sure if you ever watched The Next Generation on Star Trek, but The Next Generation Star Trek, where they would ask the computer a question and basically the computer would basically give you like a very short, succinct answer, and you could continue to kind of like, dig deeper. I kind of see that as the vision of the future, where it's like you can ask like, okay, what, patients in Alabama, what is an unmet medical need, for this? Can we do a study there? Are there enough patients? Are there enough diagnoses? So it's all in one place, because right now all that information exists. It just lives in 10 different places. To have it all in one place and be able to ask it and pull different sources of data together, I think we'll get there. I think the input in the future, I think it'll be a little different. What I envision, and maybe this is crazy, but when I used to be in the field, I used to, take notes on my phone, where I would, come out of a meeting, I remember what, was said right away, and I basically put in my MSL notes as a voice memo. That now is transcribable. It's like your MSL notes, your insights can basically happen right after a meeting when it's fresh in your head. You put it in there, feeds it in, and there you go. You have your interaction, you have your data, it goes into the data lake, and it's analyzable, So I think there's a lot of ways to make it easier, and I think, that's kind of, I think, where we're going. I'm sure there's other things out there that I'm not thinking about, but I think for me, the goal is to make it as easy as possible for the MSL to do it and not make the technology the obstacle, just make it very simple to do. And because one of the challenges, I think, that I'm sure you have the same issues, is change. People are kind of resistant to change. And I think if you make it easy for somebody, then, they're more ready to adopt it. Because that's one thing I struggle with is change management. You have to really take that into account when you do anything with, well, not just MSLs, with anybody at a job. So managing changes is part of it.
I love the idea of that, of simplicity, right? I think if we keep things simple, you can get, simple is okay. It's actually simple is favorable. And again, it goes back to how do you quantify qualitative information that allows that. It frees things up. It actually accelerates the time to be able to implement things or move things forward. I see so much value that's going to come not only from insights, but then being able to leverage technology to be able to do that. So promise us that you'll come back maybe in a year or a couple of years or so, or when, obviously it could be before that, but I would love to kind of see, okay, like where have things gone? Have they turned out the way that you anticipated? What were some roadblocks, all those types of things? I think it'll be great to hear this story. I'm excited that you have taken on this new role. I think that's the future of, it's one step closer of being able to communicate the value of medical affairs. I think this whole idea of the past 20 or 30 years that medical affairs is like gravity or something like that, right? I mean, you know it's there, you can't see it, you can't feel the impact. I think that there's no excuse anymore with the technology that's there that we can't clearly articulate the value that we're bringing. They know that we are, but how do we actually show it? And so this is going to way to be able to simplify things as well too, about even telling a story. And I think that that's part of, we've had to create stories so much from a manual basis to try to ensure people see the things that we bring. And now this is going to be something that can be instantaneous. We can look year over year, whatever time periods. There's going to be so much value, which will only increase the confidence and really solidify medical affairs as a strategic pillar within pharmaceutical industry, right? Instead of being a supportive function, to truly be a leader within organizations. So really good.
Couldn't agree with you more. I think we have so much value that it's just unrealized, that I think with these tools and with a very kind of clear head and strategy, we can demonstrate that and show our value way beyond, how many times you see somebody,
That's right.
kind of, So I think that's where the value is, and that's where the future is for sure.
Carl, this has been great. Still smiling, even as we wrap things up. Love the ideas. I love the thought process that you're already working on. The vision that you have. It's a daunting task that not many people dare take, and you don't even have the color hair that I do after starting this. I can't believe it. I figured you would either have no hair at this point, or it would be all white with all the different things you had to coordinate. Mary, I don't need any comments from you about that. So anyway, so please keep us posted on how things are going. Would love to hear more. And with that, thanks so much, listeners, for tuning into another episode of MSLead Chronicles, where leaders learn from leaders, because we can try to do this in isolation, but the question is why, and why would we want to move things forward in more of a unified fashion to really show the value that we were talking about today. So this has been an insightful conversation. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.